Hey, this is Seth Parnell, the minister of the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 121 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you're doing well. Hope things are going good for you. We appreciate you being here tonight, and hope you've been having a wonderful week. We're starting to get some little signs of fall coming out there. It's starting to cool down a little bit. The temperature's kind of dipping down into those 50s and even 40s a little bit, and so fall's it's coming. It's kind of showing itself to be coming pretty soon. And so if that's your thing, then I hope you can enjoy that coming on. I'm always a kind of a summer guy myself, but I hope that if you're enjoying those cooler weather. We always want to let you know that you are invited to visit us at the Portia Church of Christ. Right now we are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. Right now we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock for Sunday morning, 10 o'clock for Bible class, and 11 o'clock for worship service, and then 5 o'clock for Sunday night, and 6 o'clock for Wednesday night. And so if you're in our area or around one of those times, feel free to jump in, and we would love to see you. We always love to see visitors at Portia. And so know that you're always welcome there at the Portia Church of Christ. Also, if you have any suggestions, if you have any questions about what we studied tonight, then please feel free to send those our way or put them down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what you have to say. I know this is a study that we do together, and so it's always good to hear from you. Tonight, we are going to be taking a look at II Chronicles chapter 10. II Chronicles chapter 10. It's Chronicles is an interesting book because, as its name would suggest, it gives a chronicle, or it gives a record, of the era of the kings. An era in which from Saul down to Zedekiah, the kings of Israel and what they did, the good and the bad and the ugly, it records all of that and in kind of a concise format. Hundreds and hundreds of years are recorded in the book of Chronicles. And so it's an interesting book, to take a look at. And it's one that has, there's some events that tend to shape it, tend to make it, kind of change the entire course, of the nation of Israel. And we're going to take a look at one of those here tonight, here in chapter 10. Let's see. Let's bring that up. There we go. II Chronicles chapter 10. It's going to be our basis for tonight. So this is going to be maybe a little bit shorter of an episode, but I think we're still going to be able to get some good things out of this here in II Chronicles chapter 10. As we said, there are moments throughout the history of Israel that really do make a very significant impact upon the rest of the story. And especially early on, there's a couple of kings that do things that make waves years after they're gone. You think of Jeroboam. He was someone that his decision to sin and to use religious loyalty in order to consolidate his power, in order to protect his position as a king. That is something that was made all throughout the northern kings, because as we know, the northern kings were not too faithful, and none of them really had a strong trust in God. And because of that, the northern kingdom was taken away well before the southern kingdom ever was carried away into Babylon. And so it's definitely something that played a pretty significant role in that. But here in II Chronicles chapter 10, we are going to read a little bit of our section here and see what is going on, and see what happens here with King Rehoboam, who is the son of Solomon. We're going to see kind of a dicey situation he gets himself into. Starting in verse 10, it says, Then Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. And as soon as Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, for he was in Egypt where he had fled from King Solomon, then Jeroboam returned from Egypt, and they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all Israel came and said to Rehoboam, Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. He said to them, Come to me again in 3 days. And so the people went away. Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who had stood before Solomon his father, and while he was yet alive, saying, How do you advise me to answer this people? And they said to him, If you will be good to this people and please them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he abandoned the counsel that the old men gave him and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. And he said to them, What do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, Lighten the yoke that your father put on us? And the young men who had grown up with him said to him, Thus, young men who had grown up with him said to him, Thus shall you speak to the people who said to you, Your father made our yoke heavy, but you lightened it for us. Thus shall you say to them, My little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. And now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. And so we see this case here in II Chronicles chapter 10, in which Rehoboam, who is the son of Solomon, you have Saul, who is the first king, and because of his disobedience, the kingdom was taken away from Saul and was given to David. And David was someone who reigned about 40 years. He was considered one of the greatest kings in Israel's history. He was someone who was very successful militarily and with the defense. And he wanted to build a temple to God, but God said, you have fought too much. You have too much blood on your hands. And so let your son, do that. And so David assembled all the materials that he could, and so that Solomon could come in and build build a temple to God. And Solomon was someone who reigned for a good while himself, but eventually, as it does to everybody, age caught up to him, and Solomon would have to pass on the kingdom to his son, which was Rehoboam. And Rehoboam had a very interesting decision to make, because Solomon, even though under Solomon's reign, Israel was the most successful that they have ever been economically and with prosperity. They were the most successful that they had ever been. But yet there were things that had to be done in order to ensure that success. It says that the taxation was high. The forced labor was very high, and so these things caused a burden on the people. And once Solomon is gone, they come to his son and say, you need to lighten up. You need to lighten up just a little bit, because under Solomon, this was a heavy burden to bear. But if you lighten up on us, we will serve you forever. And so this man here, this Rehoboam, he has a decision to make. Is he going to be someone who listens to their request and goes and kind of eases up on the taxes, eases up on the labor, and kind of gives these people a break? Or is he going to keep the status quo? Or is he going to do something different? And as we see here, there's two different groups that he comes to. He comes to some older men who had advised Solomon. They were Solomon's advisors while he was still alive, and they tell him, listen to the people. It was hard under Solomon, and so lighten up on them, and they will be your servants. Everything will be good. But I guess something didn't seem right to Rehoboam with this, and so he goes and he goes to some of the people that he grew up with, some of the younger advisors, and he asks, what should I tell these people? What shall I give in response? And they said, you you need to make it harder. You need to be someone who comes down hard on these people. You need to make sure that they know you mean business, that they know that you are the boss, that you can't be, pushed around. And so they say, you tighten your grip on them. Don't let up on these people, or they will walk all over you. Basically, what they were saying. And this decision, even though it probably seemed, not as heavy as it ended up being, but it was probably seemed to be a lighter decision at the time. But this decision would make, like we said before, have a severe impact, upon the nation forever. And he says here in verse 11, he says, "And now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." And he basically says, you thought my father was bad. Just wait until you see what I'm going to do. Just wait till you're going to see, how I'm going to handle this situation. Which, in hindsight, it was not the right decision. I guess we're going to see, what's going to happen after this. Down in verse 12, it says, "So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king said, 'Come to me again the third day.' And the king answered them harshly, and forsaking the counsel of the old men. And King Rehoboam spoke to them according to the counsel of the young men, saying, 'My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions.' So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by God, that the Lord might fulfill his word which he spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. And when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, 'What portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Each of you to your tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, David.' So all Israel went to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, and the people of Israel stoned him to death with stones. And King Rehoboam quickly mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day." This decision that Rehoboam makes would end up dividing the nation of Israel for forever, until the time in which the northern kingdom gets taken away. They're going to be a southern kingdom and a northern kingdom. They're going to be divided, all because Rehoboam in this case listened to the wrong people. And even though down here it says down in verse 15, it says, "So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by God, that the Lord might fulfill his word with which he spoke." He mentions the prophet. Even though this is something that was brought about by God, this was still a decision that Rehoboam made that was simply the wrong one to make. And we know that a lot of times we have to be sympathetic with leaders and with people who make tough decisions, because navigating through these things isn't always the easiest thing to do. And so we shouldn't be so quick to condemn people sometimes because of the position that they're in, because when you're the one in charge, oftentimes it's not easy to make those tough decisions. But in this case, Rehoboam, he listened to the wrong people, and they would have severe consequences for him. And it would affect the rest of the Israelite history. And so one of the big problems that Rehoboam had in this case, and one of the big problems that he had in dealing with these people, is that he had this notion that he had to prove himself, that he had to prove how big he was, how much of a leader he was, how scary he was. He wanted to prove how tough he was to these people, and he even wanted to be greater than his father. And in the end, that backfired on him. But sometimes we as Christians, sometimes we may fall into that same trap as well. Sometimes we tend to think that we have to prove ourselves as well. We have to be someone who shows maybe how good we are, or shows how much of a Christian we are. But in the end, what would have saved the kingdom? What would have kept the kingdom together? If Rehoboam had been sympathetic, if he had been empathetic, if he had been someone who met these people where they were and listened to their needs and helped them along, instead of making this all about himself, then the kingdom wouldn't have split. It would have still been united throughout its history. But yet he had this prideful thinking that I have to prove myself in this case. As Christians, we don't have to prove ourselves, because we know that our strength doesn't come from us, but it comes from God. Our strength comes from the one that we serve. And so you don't have to go out and prove just how good of a Christian you are, just how faithful of a person you are. What we do have to accomplish is we have to be someone who loves your neighbor as yourself. As Matthew chapter 22 says, we have to be someone who is sympathetic with people, compassionate with people, not to show how good we are or how tough we are, but to show that we're willing to be obedient to the word of God. And compassion goes a long way. And if Rehoboam, he needed this lesson, he needed to know this, even though he would learn it when it was too late. Sometimes all we need to do is to listen to what people have to say. And there's a difference in hearing someone and listening to someone. And because if you listen to someone, then you seek to understand what they're saying from their perspective, and you want to do what you can in order to help them out, in order to, if it's an issue that they have, to help them out with the issue that you possess, that they possess. And if you're just hearing someone, then a lot of times it just goes in one ear and out the other. But if we truly take the time to listen to someone and be compassionate to what they're saying, then we can help them with their needs. And a lot of times that can help us fulfill that second greatest command. But if we're someone who's just wanting to show how right we are, how good we are, if we're wanting to show all those things to people, then in the end that might drive people away. In the end, that might divide people. One of the biggest causes of division in the church and in other places is the failure of people to listen to what other people have to say, and then getting defensive in their kind of their own mode, and in the end it just splits apart. But we don't need to fall into that trap as Christians, because we have we have a lot of work to do. We have a big mission ahead of us. And when we divide and when we get distracted with each other, that only plays into what Satan does. And we can't do that. As Christians, we don't have time for that, because we know our time on this earth is fleeting. It's short. We got to make the best use of the time that we have. And it's good to have Laverne here. Hope that you are doing good. It's good to have you here with us. Hope you had a wonderful day. Enjoy the good weather that we had. It's also good to see Carlene here. Hope that you're doing good, and good evening to you as well. Hope that you've had a peaceful and pleasant afternoon as well. But Rehoboam was someone, he had this issue that he wanted to prove himself. He had a little bit of pride in him. He didn't listen to what the people were telling him, and he didn't have compassion for the people. And in the end, like I said, that would cost him, and Israel would end up having to deal with this divided kingdom for a very, very long time. And if you look throughout the history of Israel, there would be some civil wars between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom where they'd fight against each other, Israel fighting against each other, all because this kingdom, got divided. And so this failure to listen had enormous consequences. And so we have to be quick to do that, as well. But also when you see that Rehoboam was someone here who they said, if you do this, if you're someone who, if you're someone who is good to them, like the advice that the old man gave him here in verse 7, and they said to him, if you will be good to his people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants, forever. If you're someone who wants people to treat you right, if you want people, to treat you well and to treat you good, to treat you with respect, what do you have to do first? You got to start treating other people that same way. You got to start treating other people with respect and with kindness and with with those good words, because it's perfectly unreasonable to expect somebody to treat us in a way that we won't make the effort to treat other people in that manner. But we have to be, if we're someone who does good, oftentimes that good will be returned to you. It's not always, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you do good for someone and that isn't returned to you. Sometimes they brush it off, or they may be mean or insult you in some way. It's not always returned. But majority of the time, I would say, people oftentimes are much kinder, are much nicer, are have a lot more respect for people who show that to them first. When they know that somebody's kind to them, it makes it easier for them to return that kindness. And so if we're someone who goes out and we do what Rehoboam did here and say, I'm the one in charge here. You thought that you thought my father was bad, but I'm going to discipline you with scorpions. So you better look to me. You better respect who I am. If we do that, then that's in the end, that's not going to do anything but puff up our own ego, puff up our own sense of pride. But if we follow the example of Jesus, remember, what did Jesus do? He was the Son of God. He was the Messiah. He was the King of Kings. And what did he do for his apostles? He got down on the ground and he washed their feet. The act of a servant. He said, I did not come to this world to establish an earthly kingdom, but I came as a servant. And so to serve and to be someone who meets the needs of others, that's what a Christian does. And if we're someone who does good to people, oftentimes they will give it back to us. And that everyone wants to be treated with kindness. You go to a restaurant, or you go to any type of store, and a person doesn't treat you with kindness. They're mean to you, or they don't pay attention to you, or they give you really, really bad service. When we remember that, oftentimes that makes an impact on our experience there, and sometimes that makes us not want to return to that place. But if somebody is very attentive, if they're very kind to you, and you realize that that makes you feel good. And so we always have to remember, it's not about us, but it's oftentimes about how we treat others. And so if somebody's wanting to come to church, they want to come and worship where you worship, what do we have to do? We need to be treating people with kindness and with compassion and with respect, because we can't expect it to be treated that way if we don't treat others in that manner. And so it's something that it's a lesson that Rehoboam had to learn, and you could definitely see his immaturity shine through it with what he said, especially in verse 10 and in verse 11. We see his immaturity kind of shines through in this case. But this is like I said, this is something that took place that had an impact on the rest of the history of Israel, even though it was the will of God. You imagine Rehoboam regretted this decision for the rest of his life. He no doubt looked back on this and said, well, I should have done better there. You don't want to cause a division or cause somebody to go away from the church and then look back on that and regret that, like Rehoboam did here. But we want to be someone who lets everyone know that they're welcome to come with us and to come hear how the gospel can change their life. If we can do that, I think we can do a lot of good in this world. But I think that is all we have here tonight, when we take a look at this story and what 2 Chronicles chapter 10 tells us. And if you want to read the rest of this, read through 2 Chronicles. You can go back to chapter 9 and 10 and 11, kind of tell this whole story if you want to get the whole context. But it's an interesting story to read, as the era of the kings is just getting underway. But I hope that you had like I said, I hope this is something that has been beneficial to you. We appreciate you being here tonight. We're going to be back here next Thursday for another edition of Midweek Bible Study, and I hope you will come join us then, because we always want to seek to grow with each other, to be someone who kind of gains a better understanding of the Word of God, and hopefully we can do that together as we always seek to study His Word. But until then, hope you can go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. We'll catch you next time.